Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has been out since 2014, and even now, more than a decade later, players are still getting some of the same rules wrong.
Some of these are legacy habits from earlier editions, especially for those of us who have played D&D for a long time. And others are rules that have changed with the 2024 rules update that you might slip up. And a few of these are just classic misunderstandings that never seem to go away and that players tend to get wrong all the time. So in this episode, we're going to break down 10 of these rules that D&D 5th edition players are still getting wrong in 2025.
We're going to walk through the most common mistakes, explain what the rules actually say, and help you clean up the confusion at your table. Because whether you're new to the game or you've been playing since the playtest, chances are you've been guilty of at least one of these. We certainly have been for most of them.
Yeah, and for that reason, just a reminder, it is totally okay to get the rules wrong or fudge the rules when it feels right to do so. You are within all your rights, especially as Dungeon Master, to ignore the rules entirely if you feel like they're getting in the way of the story or the encounter that you're trying to tell. One of the things that we just like to say is that being consistent and fair with the rules helps keep the game fun and grounded for everyone. It keeps expectations really clear. And being consistent with the rules also makes life a lot easier on the Dungeon Master and can kind of make sure that nothing gets truly out of hand on your plate.
So today, let's set the record straight. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
So we've all been in the place where we really want to play D&D, but our group has been slain by the scheduling monster. Or maybe you found a group on Discord or on an online forum online, and the group just fell apart after 2 sessions.
Or how about this one? Your whole group is ready to go, but nobody wants to be the game master. It's a classic scenario. And if you're new, it can actually be intimidating jumping into the GM seat or worrying about if you're going to be good enough to run the game for you and your friends.
Playing with a game master or players that you've never played with before and that you've met online can always be an uncertain experience. But that's why we're so happy to recommend this week's sponsor, Start Playing Games. This is one of the best places to go to find an excellent group and game master to play your games with. There are thousands of games available and being run now through Start Playing, and you can find D&D, Pathfinder, and so many other TTRPGs. If you wanted to play something super, super niche or the new hotness that is Daggerheart, you can find it on Start Playing Games.
The best part is the custom search. You can filter by game system, virtual tabletop, theme. You can even find a GM that you specifically want for your game, somebody who is more welcoming to new players or femme or POC, queer or neurodivergent. You can look for the people who are going to make you feel the safest at your table and get you the game that you want to play.
And you can check out their verified reviews so that you can see what other players have had to say about them to make sure that you're getting the right experience for you. One of the coolest things that's on Start Playing Games, though, I think, are all the amazing game masters that are running our very own Dungeons of Drakkenheim. So if you've always wanted to dive into the ruins of Drakkenheim and had a really polished experience, check out some of the games that are on Start Playing Games.
And here's the best part. If you're a new user and you sign up using our link that we put in the description below, you'll get $10 in credit towards your very first game.
So stop messing around with the LFG forums and get playing your game. Go to startplaying.com and find your next adventure today.
We have the links in the description below, and thank you again to Start Playing Games for sponsoring this video.
So first off is grappling as a whole. The grappling rules always seem to change in D&D, and now, if you're like me, I have like a jumble of rules from multiple different editions living in my head. And it's even worse because, once again, from 2014 to 2024, Wizards changed the rules on grappling again. So let's clear it up.
The most common mistake is resolving a grapple with an attack roll or an opposed ability check. I think both Monty and I do that at our table. We've seen it at plenty of tables that we've played at, and we do it all the time ourselves.
But it's not how grappling works in 2024. You do not make an attack roll to hit. You declare the target with your unarmed strike, and then they make a strength or dexterity saving throw. Their choice. You, as the initiator of the grapple, make no attack rolls, and there's no opposed check.
If they fail the save, they're grappled. The save DC is 8 plus your strength modifier and your proficiency bonus. You need a free hand to initiate the grapple, and each hand can only hold one creature.
And then escaping a grapple is the creature that's grappled makes an athletics or acrobatics check as their action against your DC. The grapple also ends if you become incapacitated or if you move too far away from some forced movement, and you can also release the grapple at any time, no action required.
So, as a reminder, here's what the grappled condition actually does. Your speed is 0 and can't increase. You also have disadvantage on attacks against anyone except the creature grappling you. The grappler can move while dragging you, but it costs them extra movement if they want to do that.
So that's the full picture. There's no attack roll, there's no contest, there's just a saving throw and the condition. And so that's how to run it right. But then unfortunately, the thing that's going to slip you up as a DM is that there's a ton of monsters that break these rules and actually do automatically grapple when they hit with an attack, or also cause restrained when they do that. So that'll just complicate everything for you, and yeah, everyone's going to keep getting this one wrong forever.
Now, on to the next rule that people get wrong is the only one spell with a spell slot per turn. We've talked about this one a lot on the channel.
Oh, yeah.
We've all seen the classic case where the wizard casts Misty Step as a bonus action, then tries to follow it up with a fireball on the same turn. Now, that's not allowed under the 2024 rules. Funny enough, you couldn't do this in 2014 either, but the underlying rule has changed somewhat. By the same rule, a cleric can't cast Healing Word to revive a fallen ally, then blast their foes with a Flame Strike.
So in 2014, the rule used to be tied to bonus action spells. If you cast a spell as a bonus action, you couldn't cast a spell with your action other than a cantrip in the same turn. But now the rule is a little bit simpler and more direct. Characters can only cast one spell using a spell slot per turn. So if you cast a leveled spell using your action, no bonus action spells for you at all this turn. If you cast a bonus action spell like Healing Word or Misty Step, the only spell that you could cast with your action would normally be a cantrip because those don't use spell slots.
Sorcerers and fighters can run into this all the time thanks to features like Quicken Spell and Action Surge. However, even though Quicken Spell lets you cast a spell as a bonus action, it doesn't bypass the slot restriction. An Action Surge can't be used to take the magic action in 2024, so that workaround is gone too. There are no double fireballs for Eldritch Knights and Sorcerers anymore.
So, well, it's pretty difficult to pull off casting two fireballs in the same turn in the rules. There is one edge case to know. If you have a class feature that lets you cast a leveled spell without using a spell slot, that doesn't count against the one slot per turn rule because you didn't use a spell slot. So as an example, the Archfey Warlock has their Steps the Fey feature that lets them cast Misty Step without using a spell slot. So an Archfey Warlock could use this feature to Misty Step with their bonus action, and then they could still throw down an action leveled spell like Synaptic Static on the same turn. Again, this is because their casting of Misty Step, thanks to Steps of the Fae, doesn't use a spell slot. This can also come up with any, if you've got a species feature that is giving you the ability to cast a spell from your species, or if you took a feat like Fey Touch or Shadow Touched.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that you can get around this rule with magic items like scrolls, wands, and staves.
Those key exceptions aside, the general rule is only one spell with a spell slot per turn. Interestingly enough, we've talked about this rule a lot in some of our shorts to clarify this rule, and a lot of people hate this rule and choose to ignore it. I personally think it's really good for game balance, broadly speaking. I think that especially we don't want sorcerers casting two fireballs in one turn. I just think that's too big of a damage swing in an AoE, but I have heard from a lot of tables that choose to ignore this rule. That said, I do get the point that it doesn't seem that overpowered to Misty Step then Fireball in the same turn.
No, a lot of the bonus action spells actually don't seem that problematic when you imagine combining them with a action spell. A lot of times it's like, why can't we Healing Word and then Fireball, or Misty Step and Synaptic Static?
Yeah.
It's most of the bonus action spells are ones that impact a quick option for yourself and don't do a lot of immediate damage.
Yes, I actually do have trouble thinking of an example of an actual bonus action spell that feels super overpowered to cast alongside another action spell. I think that the problem specifically lies with, again, the double fireball, like casting the same spell twice in a turn or something like that. Or like doing something where like you use Thunder Wave to push all your enemies into one spot and then trap them all in a wall of fire in the same turn. So I could you could be forgiven if you decide to ignore this rule, but where I would still say is you don't want to let sorcerers abuse it with Quicken Spell.
One of the most common mistakes that we see is players trying to stack multiple base AC calculations. You cast Mage Armor, you've got a shield, and your class gives you unarmored defense, so why not combine them all, right? Well, because that's not how it works.
Every character has a base armor class of 10 plus their dexterity modifier. If a rule gives you another base AC calculation, you can use that instead. Wearing armor of any kind gives you a base AC calculation. Plate is just a flat 18, whereas studded leather is 12 plus your dex mod. Mage armor sets your base AC to 13 plus dex, and a barbarian's unarmored defense is 10 plus dex plus con. You have to pick one base formula and you ignore the others. So it's not possible to have a barbarian with mage armor somehow that gets an AC of 13 plus dex plus con. You don't get to merge the formulas together.
Once you've chosen your base AC, you can still add bonuses on top of it, like a magic shield, a ring of protection, or the shield spell. These are modifiers, not new base calculations, so they do stack on top of the base calculation that you've chosen.
But you can't mix and match the formulas themselves. I think the most famous example I ever see of this is usually the Turtle Monk. Right. You get the player that comes to the table playing a Turtle Monk and they're like, my AC is 21. And I just like to say, like, if you've hit an AC of 20 and you're not wearing plate and a shield, and that's like your passive AC, and you're not using magic items either, you should probably double check your math and just make sure that everything's all lining up properly, because it's possible to get an AC in the low 20s permanently at pretty low levels, but
you need the right equipment to do so.
Yeah.
So remember, just to keep it simple, one base AC calculation plus bonuses. That's it.
This is a refrain that comes up every time we mention anything to do with temporary hit points, and it feels like we have to constantly remind people about this and just make sure that everyone knows that we know this too, because temporary hit points do not stack. So if you got a class like the Fiend Warlock, who uses Dark One's Blessing whenever they kill an enemy and they gain temporary hit points, you don't get to stack this together. So if somehow your Warlock like kills 3 enemies over each turn, you don't get to build up this huge buffer of temporary hit points because those aren't going to stack together.
Temporary hit points simply don't stack. If you already have temp HP and you gain more from another source, you pick one value. You don't add them together. So if you've got 10 from a spell and then trigger a feature that gives you 12, you choose to keep the 10 or you take the 12. You'd probably go for the 12, but you don't get 22.
Temporary hit points are a temporary buffer against damage. So if you take 7 damage and then have 5 temporary hit points, you lose the temps first, and then you take 2 damage to your actual hit points. Once those temporary hit points are gone, they're gone. No healing brings them back, but you can then gain temporary hit points again.
They also have a duration. Temporary hit points disappear when they're depleted or when you finish a long rest. They're not permanent, and they don't accumulate over time.
And they're not healing either. So if you're at 0 hit points and someone gives you temporary hit points, you don't get back up. You're still unconscious.
All of that being said, this doesn't make ongoing sources of temp HP useless. Far from it, in fact. If you're consistently taking damage, being able to top up each round is incredibly valuable. If you gain 12 temporary HP every turn and take 9 damage, it's absolutely worth refreshing those points at the start of next round. Even if you're in a situation where you're taking 15 damage a turn, but you're gaining 12 temp HP every round, the temp HP still acts as a replenishing barrier, meaning you're actually only taking 3 real damage to your HP every round, which is going to make your hit points last a whole lot longer.
Yeah, so while temporary hit points don't stack, if you're under fire, it's worth consistently being able to get them back. And it is worth noting that some effects do increase your durability in a way that actually does stack with temporary hit points. Spells like Aid and Hero's Feast increase your hit point maximum, not just your current HP, and they're not temporaries. Aid and Hero's Feast stack with each other, and they will then stack with whatever is giving you temporary hit points, which is why we love the Aid, Hero's Feast, Inspiring Leader combination for bards and clerics. It's a really great way to add a massive boost to your party's durability by basically giving everyone an effectively, like at higher levels, it can add up to like 30 to 40 extra effective hit points.
So to sum it up, temporary hit points don't stack, don't heal, and don't revive you, but they're still an excellent way to stay in the fight if you're using them right.
One of the biggest things that is really easy for players of all stripes to mess up, we get this wrong all the time, is that attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws are not necessarily the same thing. The game uses all 6 ability scores for everything. It's either strength something, dexterity something, based on some sort of ability score. But the mistake comes in that if you have a bonus or a penalty to strength ability checks, reading that as you have a penalty to everything involving your strength.
The common mistake comes from reading a spell like Hex or Enhance Ability and assuming it affects attacks or saving throws. For example, Hex gives disadvantage on ability checks using a chosen ability, so some players think it will mess up a barbarian's strength-based attacks, but it won't.
Or the warlock thinks they can use it to give disadvantage on saving throws against their next spell. But D&D divides D20 tests into 3 distinct categories: attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. Many spells and features apply specifically to only one of these types, and then only one of the ability scores, and that actually matters a lot.
Enhance Ability gives advantage on ability checks, not on saving throws and not on attack rolls. Bane affects attack rolls and saving throws, but not ability checks. Guidance only works on ability checks, and so on. You have to carefully read it.
Yep, yeah, you do. Just because a spell says strength or dexterity doesn't mean it's going to affect every type of roll affected by that stat. So what you're really looking for is, does it say strength attack rolls or constitution saving throws? Because if it doesn't, it might not affect those. There are rare cases where an effect applies to everything in all 3, and it might use the word D20 tests or just the term D20 tests. And if you see a feature that says this gives you advantage on a D20 test, that means that it gives you advantage on basically anything that's not a damage roll.
So before you roll, make sure you know which kind of roll you're actually making and what affects it. Confusing these 3 categories is one of the easiest ways to misapply a bonus or a debuff at the table. Trust me, I still have to ask for clarity on this one constantly. If you watch our actual play, you see me get this wrong all the time. I don't know what it is. It is a hard one to keep track of.
Yeah.
So I don't blame anybody for getting this one wrong or just like confusing it at the table. It happens a lot.
We all love rolling a natural 20, but one of the most persistent misconceptions in D&D is that a natural 20 is an automatic success on any D20 roll. It isn't.
The actual rule is very specific. A natural 20 is only an automatic success on an attack roll. It's not automatically a success on an ability check, and it's not automatically a success on a saving throw, unless a specific feature says otherwise.
This basically goes for critical hits. A natural 20 is a critical hit on an attack roll, but there's actually no such thing as critical success on a skill check or a saving throw. Rolling a natural 20 on a dexterity save doesn't guarantee that you actually dodge a fireball. You still actually have to beat the DC. So if your fighter has a no dexterity bonus and an ancient red dragon is breathing fire on you with their DC 25, you actually can never make that save. Like, you just can't.
And this is why DCs can go up to 30, because you can get a high bonus to your saving throws and such. And it works the other way too. A natural 1 isn't always a failure. If you've got a plus 13 to a bonus on a saving throw, you'll always pass a DC 10 check, even if you roll a 1. So natural 1s only count as automatic failures on attack rolls.
A lot of groups get this rule wrong because A, rolling a nat 20 on any roll is a feel-good moment, and we want to celebrate it, and you can be forgiven for that. There's a lot of other RPGs that also do critical successes on all rolls, and Baldur's Gate 3 also did this, where natural ones were automatic failures and natural 20s were automatic successes, so which was frustrating because you could like nat 1 a skill check that you could not otherwise fail. It's a fine house rule, and it's totally fine, like, colloquially to celebrate. Like, yes, if your player is jumping across the falling bridge and they windmill slam a nat 20, using that as an opportunity to, like, highlight how extra cool they are when they do that backflip is great. You just don't wanna get into trouble where, like, a nat 20 on a skill check gives the player, like, an untowards advantage, like, all of a sudden now they got to mind control the leader of the Thieves Guild because they made an amazing deception check.
So remember, automatic successes or failures only apply to attack rolls. Everything else, just make sure to check the math. Next up, we have combining magical effects. One of the easiest rules to misread is how spell effects combine. The mistake, very simply, thinking that casting the same spell multiple times on the same target will stack the effects. That's not how it works.
According to the core rules, if the same spell is cast on a creature more than once, you don't get double the benefit. Instead, you apply the most potent version, or if they're equally potent, the most recent one.
So if two clerics both cast Bless on the same fighter, that fighter doesn't get to roll 2d4 on their attacks and
I
saves.
mean, that would be sweet. But
That would be amazing.
yeah.
But no, that's not the case. They just get 1d4, no matter how many clerics are casting Bless on them.
This also applies to stacking buffs like Shield of Faith, Haste, or Heroism. Like, again, the two clerics couldn't cast Shield of Faith on the same paladin to give them a +4 to their AC. Multiple hastes are not going to give you multiple attacks or however. If someone's already under the effects of one of those spells, another casting just doesn't double it. It doesn't matter how many extra castings you have.
Even class features can have this limitation. Aura of Protection, for example, from the paladins, it doesn't stack either. If there are multiple paladins nearby, you still only
Like
benefit...
20 charisma paladins
Yeah.
standing side by side so that they have like +10 to all
Can you
saves.
imagine if you had a team of all paladins? I think we talked about this in our all
Yeah.
paladin video of how cool it would be if they did stack and how you would just have impenetrable saving throws. But
Yeah.
that's not how it works. You only get one aura at a time and you choose which to use while you're standing in both.
Now, that said, some auras can have different effects. Like, you can be in the aura of the aura of warding of an ancient's paladin and the aura of courage of another paladin, and you'll get that secondary effect, but you won't get to stack together the saving throw bonus.
This same logic applies to conditions as well. If multiple sources impose the same condition, like paralyzed or charmed, you still only have that condition once. You can't be double charmed or double paralyzed. The duration might be different, but the effects don't get worse just because you're under the condition multiple times.
There is an exception in the form of exhaustion. That's the only exception because it does add up with exhaustion levels that get worse the more exhaustion levels you gain. But again, different effects do stack. And I think that I like this because this encourages teamwork and the creative use of different abilities. So, like, a paladin can cast Bless on their allies, and those allies can also benefit from the Aura of Protection, giving them a bonus of 1d4 plus the paladin's charisma modifier on saving throws as long as they're all kind of bundled up together. So I like that, you can't just keep stacking up the same thing. You got to use a different smorgasbord of abilities, and the stacking can still get pretty powerful.
Surprise! Up next is about surprise rounds and how they aren't a thing anymore. Here's a rule that's changed and keeps catching people off guard. In older editions of D&D, surprise rounds were a distinct phase of combat.
In 2014, surprise still kind of was a thing in that it was treated as a condition that made the surprised individuals skip their first turn and be unable to take reactions. But in 2024, it's been considerably dialed back.
The most common mistake is still thinking that a surprise creature doesn't get to act at all when combat starts. But the updated rule is very, very simple. If you're surprised, you roll initiative with disadvantage. That's it.
There is no special phase. There is no skipping your turn. There is no surprise round. In theory, a surprised person could beat the initiative of their attacker.
I actually like the way that this rule works because there are certain classes or types of enemies in the game that I think should be able to quick draw you.
Yeah.
And also, this means that a surprise round isn't the nuke that it used to be.
Yes, it's still undeniably an advantage. It makes you much more likely to go before your opponents. You usually do have to have like some sort of stealth or perception check or deception. Like also like to remind DMs, it's like the players don't get surprised just because they decided to draw their swords first. I like to make sure that surprise is still something that the players have to earn through some combination of stealth, deception, some trickery. There has to be some concealing of intent. Just because you were the one that said, "Oh, I'm sick of negotiating, I'm drawing my sword and attacking," that to me isn't enough to constitute surprise.
If you're the swashbuckler rogue who took the alert feat, you still might go first in combat even if the enemies surprise you. And I kind of think that's cool to be able to quick draw on them. You're always ready. That's what the alert feat should be doing. The person who is surprised is going to roll worse on initiative, but they still act in the first round just like everybody else. It's a small change, but a big difference in how ambushes work.
So another big rule that is very easy to mess up is things concerning line of sight. And I like to remind players all the time, you need line of sight for your Misty Step destination.
Except when we forget.
Except when we forget. Um, it happens so much that I see players trying to Misty Step behind a wall, through a closed door, or around a corner, basically to somewhere that they just can't see. But Misty Step's teleportation doesn't work like that. It didn't in 2014, and it doesn't in 2024. It's to an unoccupied space you can see. And this follows through this requirement that you have to see your destination or have line of sight to your target when you cast a spell is really foundational and something that trips a lot of players up across a whole bunch of spells.
If it's behind a solid object, around a bend, in magical darkness, most of the time you can't teleport there. Remember to read the spell, though, because if it says a place that you can see or line of sight, those are the important words. There are some spells, like Dimension Door, where you can guess and hope for the best.
Yeah.
It's not just Misty Step. Plenty of other spells also require you to see the target. Banishment, Eldritch Blast, Hold Person, Counterspell, so many more. If the spell says a creature you can see, then invisibility, total cover, or darkness shuts that down.
Knowing a creature's location approximately is just not enough. D&D is very clear about these visibility requirements, so if you can't see the target or the destination, you can't cast the spell on it. So just always double check the wording, see if it says a creature you can see, or if it's using the wording like a a target within range, but isn't using the word see, that's usually an indicator that you actually don't need line of sight for that spell or effect. That's when you do get the flexibility. And this actually follows through into, I think, kind of the big rules mistake that comes up all the time, because I think that spells in general are probably the biggest area where people get the rules wrong. And it comes from this kind of core mistake. You need to read what the spell actually does, not just its name.
Surprise! One of the easiest traps in D&D is assuming what a spell does based on the name alone. I am actually shocked at how many people do this. You're trying to apply real-world logic to a magical effect. The mistake isn't just misunderstanding a rule, it's making up one that isn't even there.
My favorite example of this is Create or Destroy Water. It lets you conjure 10 gallons of water in an open container on the ground. But the spell doesn't say you can't target a creature's lungs, and it doesn't say I can't cause instant death by destroying all the water in a person's body. And my argument is the spell doesn't say that you can do that, so you can't.
The argument for the spell doesn't say I can't is actually less important than what the spell says you can do. D&D spells are defined by their specific rules text. If something's not in the description, it doesn't happen. A spell doesn't collapse a structure, melt steel, or bypass resistances unless it says it does. And a spell doesn't deal damage unless it tells you it deals damage.
Now, before we become total buzzkills on this, I want to say that creative spell use is one of the joys of D&D. And if a player pitches a really smart idea, one that makes sense, or that even the spell's descriptions allow for, like using wind wall to blow away a fog cloud, or maybe using create water to disrupt a wall of fire, you might allow it. DMs are free to make on-the-spot rulings like this if it feels clever and logical. And my recommendation here is that if a player is trying to use a spell in a creative way, look for another spell of the same level or lower and say, in this case, we're going to treat it like this. So what I might say is a player wants to use Create Water against a wall of fire. I'll say, I'm going to count this as Dispel Magic, and we're going to run it like Dispel Magic. Might not be automatic. You might have to roll. Maybe you'll have to upcast, but that's how we'll treat it in this case. Or if we want to allow a spell that doesn't normally deal damage to do damage, then maybe we'll find another spell of the same level and use that as our barometer. Because, like, one of the things that I like to remind people is in real life, getting hit by a sword is instant death. But in D&D, it does D8 damage, right? So like, the argument that, like, I think that it's important to think about, like, real world physics in relation to that as well, that we've already abstracted the idea of, like, weapon blows, which are almost universally near fatal or almost fatal if they are a square hit.
Yeah.
They've already been reduced to, like, the
Fantasy.
abstract.
It's the
Yeah,
fantasy abstract. And I do agree that creative uses of spells is one of the most fun things in the game. It's just you don't want something that the player can then replicate over and over again for instant kills. That's what you want to avoid.
Yeah.
But clever uses of a non-combat spell, something that says this doesn't do damage, but perhaps in Monty's example, if you were using Create Water to create water over a fire elemental, I might allow that to do a similar damage to, like, an acid splash or something.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the fire elemental stat block actually has a carve out in it for what happens when it's exposed to water. So, like,
cool, yeah.
sometimes the rules actually do give you some guidance on this. Sometimes you have to use your judgment, right? But I think the point that Kelly makes with this is that you want to, and this is one thing that you actually do a lot, is you'll say, we're going to make it work this way this time. But after the game session, we're going to look it up and make sure that this is the best way to run it. Because the thing that you mainly want to avoid is, like, your players talk you into allowing them to use Mage Hand to squeeze someone's heart inside their body. And now you have a cantrip that, like, instantly kills everything.
Yeah, and then all they're doing is going around mage handing every enemy, and you don't want to set that up. Oftentimes, if I'm unsure if it's something that's going to be recreatable, I flat out at the table will look at the player and say, I'm going to allow that this one time because it sounds cool and it's thematic for the moment. But if you ask me again, I might say no. And I'm just upfront about that.
Mage Hand's a good example because, like, I often will see players be like, can I use Mage Hand to tie someone's shoes together? And I'll be like, well, if you as a character were trying to do that, I'd kind of resolve that as an attack. And the Mage Hand spell says the Mage Hand spell can't attack. So, like, sometimes it's also worth applying that logic too of, like, when we're getting around, like, a very clearly stated limitation of a spell.
Very simply, don't let your players get away with murder with cantrips and spells that shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, cantrips, I think, are the big one that creativity with cantrips is great, but we don't want all of a sudden cantrips, like, being as powerful as 9th level spells.
Even the argument, like, a common one that I hear, can I use Mage Hand to poke the enemy in the eye and then give them the blinded condition? And it's like, nowhere in the spell does Mage Hand say that you could possibly do that.
Yeah.
So applying the blinded condition is a big deal, and your Mage Hand should not be able to do that.
Yeah.
All of that being said, these are the rules that a lot of people get wrong. There's a lot more out there that people get wrong. But these are the big ones that we've seen literally since 2014, even before 2014.
I would say a big one, like an honorable mention that I would just throw in there, that it comes up less because we have more character building tools like D&D Beyond now. A lot of people get confused about when they should and should not apply their proficiency bonus.
Right.
Or like, can you stack your proficiency bonus multiple times? That I would say that's an honorable mention, but I find that D&D Beyond automatically doing the calculations for you or using, like, a character building app usually nips that one in the bud. Yeah.
And just again, as a final statement, we're not here to lecture you on, oh, you're playing the game wrong, you're getting the rules wrong. A lot of people choose to ignore the rules, and that's fine.
Yeah.
The purpose of this video is to let you know what the rules actually say in case you've jumped into the game and nobody ever told you that the rule was different than the way that your table's actually running it, or you learned from your DM and who learned from their DM, and these are just strings of bad habits or just habits that have been passed down and people actually never read the actual rule. So if you're surprised by any of these and you're like, that's how it works, I hate that, then you don't have to use it.
Yeah, I think the rules of D&D are tools that we use for telling a story. And if the tool is useful to you, then use it. If you want to use the tool in a creative way, then do so. But I generally find, like, there's this quote from your film school class where you're like, we teach you the rules of filmmaking so that you know how to break them intentionally on purpose for a good reason. And for me, the rules of D&D keep the experience consistent, they keep it fair, and they help things from getting out of hand and keeping the experience manageable for the dungeon master, which I think is one of the most important things. They give you as the DM something to latch onto when your players are inevitably going to try to pull shenanigans. And so having that good balance and that good understanding of the rules is actually going to be really empowering, because you're going to know when to apply them and when you don't need to apply them for what you're trying to do. And that to me is my argument for like why it's worth understanding the rules, because they're there to support you. They're not meant to be a straitjacket that gets in your way.
All of that being said, what rules do you get wrong all the time? Maybe there's a bunch that we didn't mention. Not only you, your friends, your groups, the people you play with. What rules do you see get wrong constantly? Tell us about them in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider supporting the show. Our links to our Patreon are right down below.
And if you want to see a player get every single one of these rules wrong, you can watch me playing D&D with Monty DMing in our World of Drakkenheim right here on YouTube. Check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we've got plenty more coverage on rules and house rules for D&D right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time
in the dungeon.